right, Aftershocks Tremors, we're back here with another episode featuring some of the best up-and-coming hard rock and metal artists across the globe. And today we're going to Bucks County, Pennsylvania, as we'd like to welcome our guests from Metallic Hardcore Quintet. Gloves off, we got Cody and Ethan are joining us. Guys, what's going on? Happy New Year's. Thanks for coming on with us. How are you?
Happy New Year. How you guys doing?
Doing great. Doing great, man. Thanks for coming on, guys. All right, so gloves off, man. You guys are getting ready to release your new record, Life and Everything After. It comes out January 28th on Upstate Records. And speaking of Upstate Records, I know you guys just recently played the Family and Friends Showcase this past November. I know in Brooklyn. That was, of course, headlined by the almighty Thrash Kings, Nuclear Assault, and you had bands like Sub-Zero, Sworn Enemy, Tombs. I mean, great lineup there, man. With all the madness that's been going on with live music over the last 2 years, how great was it to be able to get out there and play a show like that with that kind of lineup, to be around all your musical peers that, especially after the last 2 years with the shit that's been going on? How good was that?
I mean, it was awesome. We mostly play with a lot of hardcore bands, so it was nice to play with like some thrash and metal bands. Okay. But I mean, even over the pandemic, we played some outside shows and stuff. We never stopped playing. We live together. So we are constantly making music, but to play in a different atmosphere to a different crowd of people, because most of the people that, go to Gloves Off shows, we're playing with bigger hardcore bands mostly, but we don't really get to play to the metal crowd a lot. So it was nice just to have a switch up.
Sure. Well, I mean, especially considering you guys have such a metallic sound, I'm sure it probably went, it probably went over really well with that kind of a lineup, compared to, say, a more punk-oriented hardcore lineup, I can imagine.
I think when we play with like metal bands, which like isn't a lot, but hopefully that changes soon. A lot of people are just like, man, how are you guys so angry all the time? And that's just what we do. And it kind of fits across a lot of different categories of music. I mean, we can play with a hardcore band, we play with a post-hardcore band, we play with a metal band, we play with a thrash band, and it's pretty much just because we write what we want to listen to and like. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure. No, absolutely. Well, let's get into the new record, man. Life and Everything After. This is, it's not your conventional type of debut full length. I mean, obviously you guys, the first part of it, there's two parts to this record. Obviously there's the first part, which was your guys' last EP that you put out right before the pandemic hit in 2020, which was Life. And that's the first 4 songs. And then the second half of the album is all the new tracks, which is Everything After. So, I mean, obviously this is, like I said, it's not really a conventional way of doing it, but I really like how you guys sort of combined your new tracks with your old ones, because like you said, you put that record out right before the pandemic. So I guess you never really had time to really push.
Yeah, it kind of died before it could even get off.
Right. Yeah. Right. So yeah, absolutely. So just go ahead and talk about why you decided to go that route by combining the new tracks with the Life EP.
Well, originally we were actually on tour when COVID happened, when everyone got shut down. Okay. We were in North Carolina and had to play one more show and then come right home. Our original idea was to think outside the box and do 2 7-inches. So it would be the thought process of at the end of your rope, being ready to die and dealing with mental health. And then the secondary part would be dealing with death after it happens and being stuck in that exact time frame.
Okay.
Right. Sure. Mm-hmm. Now, and the interesting thing though, is when you listen to it, when you listen to it straight through, and I'll just tell you, I listened to it before I read anything about you guys. Matt sent it to me. I was like, okay, play.
That's awesome.
And you don't hear a difference. You really don't hear, well, this sounds like it was recorded here and this sounds somewhere else. It really meshes well, which I think is a testament to the consistency that it sounds like you guys work on to create music. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we have a great producer we work with named AJ Vienna. He drums in a band called Hath and Cognitive. Mm-hmm. And the way he has of working with us and like our prior releases, I don't feel like I was really pushed before, at least when it came to my vocals. I can only really speak for what I do.
Sure.
He has a certain way of just like not taking my shit and pushing me. And I went to school for English, so all I do is write. And it just made sense to do something in a more creative manner instead of just writing cookie cutter, dry, either beat down metal or whatever. We wanted to have a sound that was all our own, that each one of us brings a different like piece to the puzzle.
Sure. And you know, the interesting thing too is listening to it, the lyrics, they're dark as fuck. There's no two ways about it. It's just very dark, very, very mean. But I don't think it's done in a way like, and you guys know this, most metal bands do it just for shock value. I don't think that's what you guys are doing at all. I came out of a few listens to the record thinking this is almost showing darkness to make you evaluate where you fit with that darkness. Is that kind of where you were going?
Absolutely. I, like a lot of other people in the world, and like both of us, we struggle with mental illness, and it's something that doesn't get talked about a lot. But when you do music, you know, whether it's shock value, entertainment value, or whatever, I just write about what I know, and there's a darker side to life that affects us all, and some of us are just more open to it and better at expressing it. And I know I'm not alone when it comes to the darker side of life. And I know people have like dark sense of humors and everything else, but mine's not fake. It is what it is. I talk about it. I write about it. I play about it because that's what I struggle with. And at least when it comes to music, for me, it's about struggle.
Right. I think that shit kind of comes with age too. Like the older you get, you kind of like your friends start to die around you, family members start to die. Like you kind of, the older you get, you kind of just get surrounded by it. So it's like, you either make something positive out of it or you'll just let yourself get consumed by it.
Sure.
So we just try to turn it into something better than just sitting around the house moping because shit's happening.
Right. Makes sense. Let me ask you a kind of a really not a music question, but you guys brought it up a couple times, so I want to explore it, which is the topic of mental illness. And obviously it forever has had the stigma. It has two stigmas. One, it has the, oh, this guy's fucking crazy, stay away from him. It has that stigma to it, but it also has the stigma of somebody that's going through it doesn't understand that they're going through it. And that is the part I'm curious about. You guys kind of are saying that you guys have battled with it. How do you know it's mental illness versus just being angry or just being, you know?
You want to go first? I'll go second.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I'm certainly not going to say I'm not mentally ill. There's enough people have said it to me, but but for me, if I am, it's a mystery to me. I just think I'm me, you know, and that's where I'm always, I don't understand. How do you determine what is you versus what is a mental illness, deficiency, what have you?
I think the most important thing about mental illness in itself, I think, especially these days, is to go and see a specialist.
Okay.
Because with like, you've got all these kids, mental health is such a fad now. It would be so people are doing all this self-diagnosing and everything's a trend and everything's and that. And it's like, there's nothing cool about wanting to drive your car off a fucking bridge.
Right.
It's not cool. It's not trendy. Like, it's a real thing. Like, years ago, I lived in Florida. I had a fucking telephone pole on my way to work that I knew, like, if I hit like 85 and hit this pole, everything's done.
Right.
So it's like, I think when you get to the point where you kind of stop feeling like sad, you stop feeling upset, you kind of just got this neutral line where you could just die and it doesn't matter. That's about the point where you probably need to go see somebody.
Okay.
Really, dude?
Nice.
Come on. Sasha, sorry, I got a bulldog.
Oh, it's all good, man.
With me, my family suffers from a lot of mental illness, especially my mom. We don't have a relationship whatsoever, and it's kind of always been that way. So I've always been kind of in tune with the fact that I had things wrong with me. And like 20 years ago, I went and got help, and I was diagnosed with bipolar. They tried to put me on all these meds, pretty much just made me like a numb kid. And I got sent away for quite a long time, like probably like 8 months or whatever, to get like residential help or whatever. And then all these years later, I'm married now. I'm still a psychopath. There's no way of getting around that. I'm very dark all the time. But I got re-diagnosed this year with BPD, which is borderline personality disorder. And I think one of the main things with like coming out about all of our mental health struggles is like I decided to seek knowledge. I read up on it. I looked at what triggers me. I looked at the points of what makes me that way. and I just try to identify with it more. So when it comes to like, how did I know? I think I've always known that I'm not like other people, but there are people like me.
Sure. Does exposing it to the public make it easier for you to deal with it because it's not like a dirty little secret anymore?
I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think so. And like with us, it's more of a therapy thing for us to do the band. Like if the band stopped being fun, honestly, I don't care how big we are or how good we're doing, we would stop doing it. It's more of a therapeutic thing for us to get it out, because if we just hold it in, you know, it's just going to explode.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I totally understand. I mean, you know, the one thing too with the mental illness, you know, obviously the greatest thing about, you know, music like hardcore and metal is, like you said, not only are you able to, you know, express yourself and just kind of use it as a therapeutic, you know, outlet, but what's great is you've got a whole bunch of your fans and audience there that is going through the same thing. You know,
I think that was one of the things that scared us was like, you know, before when we were a band, I would pick random 90s movies and write stories about them, like Kindergarten Cop and High Fidelity, because I wanted to have fun. Right. And then it got to the point of, you know, we're going to do what we want to do. And are people going to like it? We don't know. But all that matters is we like it. We enjoy it. And it's our output of emotions and daily life. And like, luckily people do like it. I mean, if they didn't, oh, fucking well. But I'm glad people do like it and connect with it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And what's kind of interesting too is obviously, you know, with your lyrics, I mean, and we'll get into talking about the first, you know, the first single here off the record, Conquer a Worm. Obviously, that's inspired by an Edgar Allan Poe. The track's inspired by Edgar Allan Poe. As you mentioned earlier, you went to school as an English major before English, so I'm sure that ties in obviously to a lot of maybe what you did or read or studied or whatever in school. Go ahead and tell us just about, you know, what was it about Poe that gave you the idea to write the lyrics to that song? Since it is, I mean, it's very unusual but refreshing, no doubt, to see a band like yours draw inspiration from a literary legend like that.
At least with me, I've always had a fascination with death. I collect wet specimens. I collect skeletons. I've just always had this weird romance with death, and it being not only like a terrible thing, but also a beautiful thing, because death is a beautiful thing. I don't give a fuck what anyone says. There's a certain beauty that comes with death as well. But when it came to Poe, I feel like he always had this way of touching on death in an artistic way and always somehow tied it in with modern day life. Even if it was like metaphors and analogies, like Conquer a Worm is about a worm destroying these like angelic like beings, and the worm's actually mankind destroying people from the inside, which I always thought was super wild. And like, I don't think I appreciated it as much when I was younger. I've always been real big into like Arthur Rimbaud, who's like a French poet that's all about death. Eddie and the Cruisers was inspired by Arthur Rimbaud, which is, you know, not huge on Jersey, but whatever. Right. And I've always been like about that, and Bukowski, and even like Robert Frost on the more like pretty, you know, mainstream poetry. And it's just, I can draw certain images in my head that I get from reading, and I prefer to read than actually go out and talk to people.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, like me being outgoing is just a part of me being in the band. The real me, I don't really want to be around people that much, to be honest with you. I like being more by myself and more in my own thoughts, because I feel like that's how you find yourself.
Sure, that was good. I agree with that, absolutely. And I'm going to bring up, you know, a guy you just mentioned, Arthur Rimbaud. So, I mean, you wrote the second single that's going to come off the record, "My Death Was a Banquet," was inspired by him, and he's had a big influence, that guy, on a lot of songwriters over the years. Bob Dylan, Jim Morrison, Patti Smith. So many people back then. A lot of musicians referred to him, arguably, as the first punk ever.
Absolutely.
From what the language that he uses, in his poet. So talk about that inspiration as well with that song.
When I was a kid, I had like a really rough childhood, obviously, and my grandma took me in a lot when I was a kid. Even became like my legal guardian when I became like 15. And we used to watch Eddie and the Cruisers all the time, and I would always hear about A Season in Hell and faking your own death, and this beauty in being bitter and being angry and sad. And I just started reading it when I was a kid, and it just always stuck with me. I mean, I have an Arthur Rimbaud tattoo, It's just always been this weird, obscure, like literally the first punk, the first rebellious person that literally got addicted to absinthe, slept next to dead bodies during like, what was that, World War I or whatever in France, and then faked his own death because he didn't want to be around people anymore.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's something about the extremeness of
Right.
that kind of commitment. So, yeah, it is.
Where so you got my mind going in everywhere but music, but where do you come in with like serial killers? Do you look at serial killers as an art, or do you look at it as just sick as fuck, or a little of both, or what?
I have serial killer portraits tattooed all over me. My grandma again was super into psychology and criminal profiling, and I always thought it was crazy how there's like this like connection between childhood and adolescence and all these different factors which turn these people into this sort of monster, and it also dictates how they kill people, how they act, how they flee. It's just this weird correlation is that the word? Correlation of all these different factors. Public school, yeah. I went to Catholic school. I know it was rough.
I did too. It was rough too. I know.
Yeah. So I don't know, something about psychology and the way people tick, and when your wiring's wrong, it's wrong, and it just always got to me.
Sure. No, I'm fascinated with serial killers as well. I've watched every documentary I think that there is on all of them, whether it's if a business that I own was actually featured in Mindhunter. So
That's awesome.
I'm way into serial killers and stuff like that. But now, let me go back to music because we could talk. But you know, I'm pretty familiar with the Pittsburgh scene and have been for 25 years or whatever. And I know that's not indicative of the whole state, but that scene itself used to be really strong as far as kind of the crossover stuff that I think you get lumped into. I don't think you actually are that, but you are lumped into that a little bit.
Yep.
And I mean, there were bands 10, 15 years ago, Built Upon Frustration and Endless, bands
No Retreat.
No Retreat, exactly. That were we're rising up, and we're big in that scene. But what is that scene now? That scene just kind of went away. Is it hard to find fans and bands to play with and bands that make sense to play with, or no?
I got a really good answer for this. We would have killed it in the early 2000s, dude. Yeah. Honestly, there are some bands out there that kind of fit that crossover. There's bands like Bushido Code, See You Space Cowboy does some crazy stuff. Wrist Meets Razor, Inclination. There's a lot of bands knocked loose that draw from this metallic side. The thing is we're so fluid between hardcore, metal, whatever. Like, there's a lot of our bands that we could play on any sort of thing. And so, like, the scene is still there. It's just not a singular entity.
Sure. Is it easy or hard to get gigs? Because I'd imagine because you don't fit into a simple category that a lot of bands would be afraid to work. I think hardcore bands do not want to deal with you because you guys are way too metallic for most hardcore bands.
It's the opposite.
Really?
Really? Wow.
So I grew up in hardcore scene in Bucks County, which was like, if you ever want to YouTube Palanca Park, crazy shows back in the day.
Nice.
But I grew up in this for the last 20 years. So my closest friends are still my friends from 20 years ago that I grew up going to the First Unitarian Church in Philly, Palanca Park, even going to Jersey, New York, Connecticut. So, I mean, I think it's more of they know we're not as angry as we sound, I guess. And we're really easy to deal with. We're like, all right, what time you need us there? Cool. Are you paying us or not? Cool. Done. We'll play and we'll give it our all and then help out for the rest of the show, helping bands break down, whatever. So the camaraderie of hardcore is where we fit into, not necessarily the sound. Okay. Honestly, the harder area we've been trying to get into is like the metalcore area, because I feel like we always play with hardcore bands, so everyone just assumes, we only play hardcore shows, but in reality, we want to play anywhere where someone can listen and connect with us.
Sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
I think what benefits us really is like every show kind of has that one weird band that doesn't fit, but they're still good.
Sure.
So you have no idea why they're on the show, but you want to watch them. So we kind of just get a lot of that. It's like, I don't know why these guys are here, but I like them. I'm gonna keep putting them on stuff whether they fit there or not.
Yeah,
sure, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, and there has been such really an influx of I guess metallic sort of hardcore bands coming out of Pennsylvania. I mean, you mentioned one before, Bushido Code, great, band. We interviewed them last year. I mean, you got I know Inner Turmoil, another really solid band. Jesus Piece, obviously. I mean, obviously the big one was Code Orange. I know that they're sort of like you can't talk about them anymore in the scene, is what I've been told. But
yeah, I don't know. I think they're 9 inches or something. I don't know.
Yeah. But I mean, it really is starting to flourish, and it's funny because when people start, when they think of hardcore or even just a hardcore metal, a lot of times, people think of New York, but New York, it's all punk centric, and then obviously when you go further west and you get to say Cleveland, Cleveland always had more the metallic sound within their hardcore. And then I guess with you guys, it's like, I mean, do you think finally, because there's been, obviously like a label like Upstate's obviously really recognizing what's going on in the state. They've been really supporting a lot of bands from Pennsylvania. Is it, you think, because you think over the years, maybe it wasn't as flourishing as it is now, is because you were sort of stuck in between those two cities where they were kind of known, back in the 80s and 90s for their hardcore, where now things are starting to maybe become more centralized into Pennsylvania, where it's just becoming bigger and I guess more well known than it had been before?
I mean, I think a lot of the reasons why bands are coming out now, like you said, Jesus Piece and all them, and like even Descent that used to be on our label, we all hang out together, grew up together, tour together. So it's one of those things that like I think we've all pushed each other. So playing, I mean, even Descent, we toured with Descent and Departed in Texas and stuff. And even when we came back, we would all be like talking about different riffs and different parts.
Okay.
And it just kind of pushed each other to do all this stuff. And like it kind of closed that gap.
Okay.
That there was no longer a gap because it was our team versus everybody. Sure. So all of us, Inner Turmoil, all the PA bands, Jersey bands, some New York bands, Baltimore guys, and like we have a deep connection with all the North Carolina bands too, because we are always down there. And I think it's everyone just pushing each other, and it's not so much of a competition; it's a competition between ourselves.
Okay, that's fair. It sounds interesting.
It's always competition for him. Always.
Somebody writes a good riff, I get real mad, and I gotta write it back. Just the way it is.
We played a show was 2 weeks ago in Harrisburg, and he's like, "Yeah, you like that riff? I wrote it. Can't write a better one, can you?" Didn't think so. I was like, "Cool." Dude. Everyone thinks we're like super assholes. In reality, we're just having fun.
Now I'll go to my grave. The heaviest breakdown of all time is on our record. I wrote it. I will take that to my grave. I don't care who disagrees. Doesn't matter to me.
Confidence.
Nothing wrong with that. Look, if you're not confident, then you might as well stay off the stage in the first place, right?
Exactly.
And honestly, like usually we don't get to do a podcast together because we're on opposite schedules usually, even though we live together. I always give them all the credit. Like I know everyone, focuses on my lyrics and how I write and how in depth it is. But in reality, those guys are like the real heroes of this band. They do things that I wouldn't even think of or even like contemplate doing in a song, and they just work well together.
Yeah. Well, dude, it's interesting you say that, because before we got started, Matt and I were just kind of talking about your band a little bit, just kind of getting ready for the interview. And we were talking specifically about the music and about how metallic, but not in like the musical way it is, how just gritty, raw, dragging a piece of iron across another piece of iron sound it is, and then you say the exact same thing basically, man. I mean, that's really the feel you're giving out.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, I want a riff I write to make people uncomfortable. I don't want you to sit and lounge putting the gloves off. I want you to be physically disturbed.
Right.
So that's kind of my goal going into anything. I want something that makes you have to punch somebody. I don't want you to want to do it. I want you to have to do it.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna just got one more question, guys. I want to ask you about the album cover. I'm gonna bring this up in a second here. So what's really cool about this is essentially the same sort of cover as you had with the Life EP, except with the snakes around the vase there, which obviously that represents the end everything after portion of the record. Which I think it's a great concept. You guys are doing it this way because, like I said, you're not necessarily repackaging the EP, but you're obviously not forgetting it, and you're kind of, this is just a way of showing that you're adding on to it, which I think is really interesting. What was the decision to kind of go with, basically almost the same cover, but instead of trying to wrap it up in a pretty, new bow, which could mislead fans, you just kind of add a little element to it, and it I think it fits perfectly. Just talk a bit about what made you go with this album cover.
Well, originally we were going to do 2 7-inches, so it would have been when you open it up, it would have been the 2 separate images, and the front was always going to be like this. It'd be both one put together as like one concept album. Think of like not on the same level, but like Boys Night Out, Trainwreck, or like Cursive, like more like artsy, kind of pushing the envelope kind of stuff. And I always liked the thought process of the imagery of, if we're going to have the old songs on there, still have that present, but realize that it's a continuation of the same thought process before.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, I think it's a great.
We actually argued over the album art for like 3 weeks.
Like really stupid shit, like the fucking vines around the square. Like we argue about the dumbest shit, but it takes so long to make such subtle, stupid fucking decisions.
Nice.
Which big shout out to Chris Ventura. He's in a band called Ripped Away. He does all of our imagery and art.
Yeah, Chris rules.
Cool.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's important. Imagery is super important. I think it gets overlooked a lot of times. I mean, it really is so important to have the right imagery, where those little tiny things might seem very, infantile or very, not important, but they really are in the long run when it comes to people, deciding
Our new thing,
thing,
all of our merch, stickers, everything. On the pre-order that's on Upstate Records right now for the vinyl and like the sweatshirt and everything, we're just gonna put a noose with a heart on everything. We just have that imagery of like, I feel that represents us as a band as a whole, of just like constantly being on the verge of death, but having a love with it as well.
Sure. Yeah, no, very nice.
I'm very artsy. I eat with my pinky out. I'm very well mannered.
You're not a poor kid.
Awesome. So what do you guys got planned now for the record to promote it? I mean, are you going to continue to play locally? Any kind of festivals or anything come up? I know a lot of places are kind of going backwards right now with live music, but there are a lot of states that are still open and doing pretty well in terms of supporting and having shows go on. What's your guys' plan right now to promote this?
We have February 5th in South Philly. We're going to do a record release show with a bunch of our friends. There's a band on there called Greater Pain, which is really good. Another band called On Sight. Another band called Grace, which is members of Descent and Suburban Scum. Our old bass player's rap group, Dumb Ugly, is opening, and they're amazing. Nice. And then another band called, was it Modern Prisoner?
Yeah.
Model Prisoner. Model Prisoner. And then we have a run in March for 4 or 5 days with a band called Fever Strike out of North Carolina, which is going to be, I think it's Boston, New York, Boston, New York, Pennsylvania, and I think somewhere else. And then we're working on doing a weekend with a band called Street Truck from Altoona, which is really, really awesome. Really good friends of ours.
Very cool. All right.
I want to go back to the South. Everyone down South treats us so great. There's a band in North Carolina called Violent Life, Violent Death. And we absolutely love those dudes and always want to hang with them. And then we also want to come back upstate New York with our boys in Concrete too.
Yeah, Concrete rules.
Awesome. Very good, man. Very good. All right. Once again, the record is Life and Everything After. It comes out January 28th on Upstate Records. Guys, go ahead and let people know where they can go to keep up with you guys, pick up merch, listen to your music, and all that stuff.
You can go to glovesoffpa.com, I think it is, or pahardcore.com, something like that. I'm not in charge of any of the social media stuff because I post really stupid oxalotls and stuff.
Yeah. Never put spaces after commas.
Yeah, I never put spaces after commas, so I've been vouched for that. And then, I'm not allowed to sell merch anymore either because I just forget to sell it and give it to people.
Yeah, he forgets about the selling part.
Yeah.
And you're an English major and you forget about the comma? What?
Every time. My thumbs are really big and I just don't care in it. You can follow us on Instagram at glovesoffpahc. Same thing with Facebook. And honestly, just come out and talk to us, hang out with us. You can get all of our stuff off Upstate Records too. We're really not as shitty as we portray ourselves to be. You can always come up and talk to us. If you want to book us, reach out to us. We just want to have fun, hang out, and do what we like to do.
I don't want to come and talk to me. I might be drunk and say something they don't like.
Yeah, don't talk to him. You can talk to me or
talk to everybody else, just not me.
And who knows, if you do come up and talk to the right person, you might get a free hoodie out of it. So why not?
Most likely.
It's not me anymore.
Nice.
Awesome. All right. Once again, Gloves Off is the band, Life and Everything After is the record. And guys, thanks so much for coming on with us. Appreciate it, and good luck with everything.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Thanks for having us, guys.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
Take it easy.
All right, fellas, take care.